Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Phoenixville Borough Council meeting for September 9th of 2014. We'll start with a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order. Mr. Crack, roll call, please.
Mr. Bowers? Present. Mr. Dalton?
Present.
Ms. Dugan?
Here.
Mr. Ichter?
Present.
Mr. Kuznar?
Here.
Ms. Mayo?
Here.
Mr. Prednick?
Here.
Mr. Kowalewski?
Present.
Mr. Mayor?
December 5.
Manager, Solicitor, Chief are all here. You have a quorum.
Moving on with the agenda, item 3, consider approval of the August 12th, 2014 minutes. What is council's pleasure?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Ichter. Mr. Prednick?
I only have one comment, and I think it was correction to one of the items that I can speak that day. But C1 regarding the sign at 323 Birch Street. My motion was yes, and I think my hand signs or my iPad said no, but my motion was a yes.
We'll make that correction in the minutes. Any other additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor with the proposed change? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. We have the honor of being joined by the members of our Phoenixville Police Department. They are going to get a well-deserved acknowledgement here in a couple moments, but before we get there, I'm going to ask the Mayor Speck to come around to the front for the swearing in of Officer Andrew Brown. Mr. Mayor, you might want to grab that microphone.
Let me come up to the center here. Okay, good evening. I state your name, do solemnly swear, place your right hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Place your right hand on the Bible. Put that under your shoulder. Raise your right hand. Okay, let's go. I state your name, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the laws of Pennsylvania, and the Borough of Phoenixville.
I, Andrew P. Brown, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the laws of Pennsylvania, and the Borough of Phoenixville.
I will, with fidelity, discharge the duties of the office as an officer with the Borough of Phoenixville Police Department, Phoenixville, Chester County, Pennsylvania.
I will, with fidelity, discharge the duties of an office as an officer with the Borough of Phoenixville Police Department, Phoenixville, Chester County, Pennsylvania.
I will uphold, obey, and enforce the law without consideration of a person's race, color, sex, religious creed, sexual orientation, age, national origin, ancestry, handicap, or disability.
I will withhold, obey, and enforce the law without consideration of a person's race, color, sex, religious creed, sexual orientation, age, national origin, ancestry, handicapped, or disability.
Congratulations, Officer Brown. Welcome.
Why don't you go around and shake everybody's hand on council?
Yes, sir.
The next thing on the agenda, I have the honor and privilege to call forward two distinguished guests that are here today to present an award to the police department. Chester County District Attorney Tom Hogan and retired Pennsylvania State Police Deputy Commissioner and retired Allentown Police Chief Joe Blackburn.
Okay, well, I'm Joe Blackburn. It's really an honor to be here tonight to make a presentation of this type. But before I do, I'd like to tell everyone a little bit about the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. The Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association introduced the program in 2001. The program was designed and developed by Pennsylvania professional law enforcement executives to provide a reasonable and cost-effective plan for professionalization of law enforcement agencies in the Commonwealth. Accreditation isn't a foreign word to anyone. We have expectations that our schools, colleges, universities, healthcare centers, laboratories, and other institutions gain accreditation. So why not our police departments? The Phoenixville Borough Police Department has gone through a rigorous accreditation process. The process started when the police department made it known that they wanted to pursue accreditation. They began to prepare. The preparation for this to gain accredited status is time-consuming, it's very frustrating, it's very intense. After enrolling in the program, the department did a process of self-assessment. And once they felt that they were ready, they engaged in a mock assessment performed by volunteer assessors from around the state. They gave the Phoenixville Police Department a report on what needs to be revised, corrected, or completed before they requested the official on-site assessment. When they were ready, they contacted my office, and I assigned 3 assessors to visit the police department. One assessor, the team leader, was from the Somerset Borough Police Department. Another was from the Southampton Township Police Department, and a third from the Upper Saucon Township Police Department. They inspected the police department facilities, they interviewed officers, they went on ride-alongs, and they inspected the required accreditation standard files. And it should be known that it's not enough to have a policy which addresses the standard. You must also have proof of compliance in that file. You must show that you actually implement those policies and that you live by them. But that's not the end of it. The full report is then presented to the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission, and they voted unanimously to approve accredited status for the Phoenixville Borough Police Department. And then the report went before the executive board of the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association, where it again received unanimous approval. Phoenixville Borough Police Department has joined a very distinctive group of law enforcement agencies in Pennsylvania. With over 1,100 police departments in Pennsylvania, there are only 94 that have reached this accredited status, while hundreds are pursuing it. So who deserves to be recognized for such an accomplishment? Of course, Chief Mossman, the command staff, the accreditation manager, Sergeant Marshall, the men and women of the police department, Mayor Speck, members of the Borough Council, and the citizens of the Borough of Phoenixville, who support their police department and deserve a police department that meets professional standards. The question always is, what are the benefits of this? It really is a blueprint. It's a blueprint for excellence. It gives officers clear guidance. It reduces exposure of the officers and the borough to liability. It requires constant self-assessment, because in 3 years we'll be back to do a reaccreditation. It promotes the effective and efficient use of resources, and it ensures that the police department is meeting its obligations that are mandated by Pennsylvania law. But most importantly, it instills citizen confidence in the Phoenixville Borough Police Department. And with that, I would like to present the accreditation certificate to the President and members of Borough Council. Let me go up here? Sure. Absolutely. And I'll read the certificate. Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association, to all who see this certificate, know that the Phoenixville Borough Police Department, having fulfilled the necessary qualifications and mandatory requirements of the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Program of the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association, by voluntarily complying with the provisions of the Professional Law Enforcement Accreditation Program by means of achieving and demonstrating the highest acknowledged standards as required by the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission, is hereby recommended and approved and authorized to receive this certificate of law enforcement accreditation, effective the 10th day of June, the year 2014, for a term of 3 years.
On behalf of the borough, very honored to accept this. I'd like to call Chief Mossman and Mayor Speck to come up and also receive it on behalf of the borough. It's through their hard work that it is earned. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackburn. To follow up that, it is not nearly as nice as a certificate as you brought, but I've got something that I'd like to ask council approve tonight. It's a proclamation. I'll read it, and then I'll ask for a motion on it. The proclamation was prepared by Mayor Speck, and what it says is that, whereas the 16th day of July 2014 marked the effective date in which the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission recommended, approved, and authorized the Phoenixville Borough Police Department to receive the certification of law enforcement accreditation. And whereas the Phoenixville Borough Police Department, having fulfilled the necessary qualifications and mandatory requirements of the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Program of the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association, and whereas the Phoenixville Borough Police Department voluntarily complied with the provisions of a professional law enforcement accreditation program by means of achieving and demonstrating the highest standards as required. And whereas acknowledging that the Phoenixville Borough Police Department subscribes to the words of Aristotle, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act but a habit. Therefore, I, James Kovaleski, along with the members of the Phoenixville Borough Council, do hereby congratulate Chief Mossman, Mayor Michael Speck, officers and staff of the Phoenixville Borough Police Department by proclaiming September 9th, 2014 as the recognition day for the Phoenixville Borough Police Department accreditation in the Borough of Phoenixville.
I'll move to accept that proclamation.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Perednik. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? I'll sign this and I'll give this to Chief Mossman. It is an honor to do so, and I'd like to personally thank every member of the police force that went through this accreditation and worked very hard in order to bring us here to this day and be able to celebrate and acknowledge all that hard work. Thank you very much, officers. And I believe Chief Mossman has some words.
I've got the floor for just a second. I just wanted to say I appreciate Mr. Blackburn coming out here tonight and explaining how the process worked, where we fit in the pecking order, and you know where we stand as far as the agencies in the state, but I wanted to let everybody know that as far as Chester County is concerned, there's only 2 police departments in Chester County that are accredited. And this is clearly the leading police department in Chester County, everybody here. I told them before the ceremony that it's easy for me to sit in my office and send out a policy. That's not the tough part. The tough part is they have to go out every single day and they have to actually prove that they are living by those policies and those highest standards. This department is leading by example, and I couldn't be more proud, and I'm just so thankful we were able to share it with everybody here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Mossman. I'll invite any council comments that anyone would like to have. I think everyone has said it. Oh, Mr. Predick.
I mean, I don't know what better word to say, just that it's an honor to be in the presence of a good department. And thank you all for your hard efforts. It's appreciated by everyone.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, just to let the public and council know, prior to our ceremony this evening, the chief and I presented every member of our department with the Grand Cordon, which is basically a unit citation for their participation in the department achieving accreditation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you again, all the officers and of the police department. Well deserved tonight. Thank you. Moving on with the agenda, although I think it's going to be a bit of a letdown after that wonderful ceremony. We'll move on to item 5, public participation, and I will open up the first round of public participation and invite any members of the public that wishes to participate to come up to the podium to sign in and to acknowledge whether or not you're a borough resident.
Good evening, Council President, members of Council, Chief, Mayor, Borough Manager. I'm here tonight just to take a few seconds of your time. The residents of Griffin Street between Gay and Main have been extremely concerned and expressing that concern about the amount of traffic, which we know that there's not a lot we can do about the amount. But the fact that it is the cut through from Nut Road over headed south towards Great Valley, Office Park, Industrial Center. And anywhere from 6:15 until about 8:30, 9 o'clock, we have a significant traffic and speeding problem. 6:30 in the morning, there are cars going down Griffin Street, I assume on their way to work, no less than 50 miles an hour, some faster. And in the evening rush hour, anywhere from 3:30 to 6:30, same problem in reverse. Councilman Perednik has been kind enough to take the lead on getting a petition together, which everybody on the block signed, and trying to get a speed hump to try to slow this traffic down. Unfortunately, from a police action activity, there's just no good place to do it. It's a fairly short block, and there's no side streets or anything. They just get on the gas and then scream up to the stop sign in both directions. We have a lot of small children in the neighborhood and a lot of concern. And I know that, like say, Shay has been taking the lead for us, and hopefully you will follow his lead in trying to resolve this problem. It occurs really as a result of people cutting off Nut Road because the lights during rush hour are not particularly favorable to rush hour traffic. We all know that traffic backs up from White Horse Road all the way back sometimes to Walgreens, and people are now cutting through the residential district. The problem is not so much the cutting. I would do the same thing. The problem is cutting and doing it at 50 miles an hour. So that if there's anything that council can do, I know there's not a lot we can do about the intersections. They're state highways. Could use some turning lanes and different lighting, but that's a long-term, complicated project. We think that a speed hump, not dissimilar from the one on Anderson Avenue, would be a very big help, and we appreciate your attention and hopefully action in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Zanuck, Fillmore Street, Phoenixville. Comment on a letter that I wrote to the Borough Council. Well, I wrote it to President Kovaleski, and I think my two council people got it also, concerning the talks that are in process about, I think Jeremy, you might have got a copy too, with PennDOT, East Pikeland, and Cutler Group, and about the Chester-Montgomery County right-of-way, also known as Phoenixville Spur. I think the Borough Council needs to take a look at that and at least have some understanding of what's going on there. PennDOT, I believe, is talking about abandoning that for putting housing on that in exchange for, I don't have all the details, so these are things that I pick up as I attend meetings, for road improvements at the Y there, 23724. Regardless, if you read my letter, which I've written, I think one thing that really needs to be kept intact there is the right-of-way itself. And as opposed to putting housing on it, which would allow no future use of that right-of-way of any sort. It would destroy the whole concept. I don't see why the housing couldn't go forward with the road improvements, yet keep the artery, at least the proposed artery, open. And I think you got to look at a couple things there. That Cutler project, which I think Toll's taking over, is going to be in excess of 200 houses. I believe there's another 300 units coming out on Spring City Road, where they were proposing those manufactured houses about 15 years ago. We have, before the Planning Commission here, there's a number of large projects. There's a lot of housing units coming in. And my understanding that we're getting a trade-off for a little bit of a route through of the old Northern Relief route, but it's not the same magnitude of highway. It's not the same type of road. So, and also we're within 8 miles of an aging nuclear plant. And I think you just have to be a little prudent about giving up road or any kind of movement right-of-ways for that purpose. Right now, we're building a trail on a railroad right-of-way that I think is 150 years old. If that was all houses, you wouldn't be building a trail on it. And 'cause people say, well, it's been on the books for a while. Well, many roads are. So and also I think it'd be prudent for the Borough Council to do some economic analysis on, what are the trade-offs, what are the pluses and minuses to the borough. Certainly the other townships that are impacted of it have. And I think it would only be prudent for our council to look into that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Senek. Seeing no other public participation, we'll close the first round of public participation and move on to item 6, appointments and public resolutions. Call for residents interested in being appointed to various boards and commissions. Mr. Richter?
Mr. President, I'd like to ask for a motion to accept my resignation from HARB in consideration of a future appointment.
What is council's pleasure with regard to a proposed motion along those lines? He needs a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Mr. Dalton, to accept Mr. Richter's resignation from HARB, subject to an appointment to fill that seat, is my understanding. Any discussion on the motion? I'd just like to thank Mr. Richter for his service on HARB. Much appreciated. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Do we have any other? Mr. Kuzner?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Ryan Norris to HARB to replace John Echter's seat.
Motion by Mr. Kuzner, second by Ms. Mayo, to appoint Ryan Norris, who was the gentleman, I believe, that we interviewed last month for an open planning commission seat. Any discussion on that motion? Mr. Prednick?
Just for the borough manager or the solicitor, what's the general policy? I know with planning commission, they have to interview at council. Is it the same thing for HARB, or is it a requirement by some sort of ordinance that they have to interview here?
It's your policy as to how you want to do your interviews of HARB, ZHB, planning, and other such commissions. That you set that tone.
Okay. Then I would just say, why are we not following the standard and have Mr. Norris come by the police personnel and safety and review there, just like every other seat we've had? I know.
Well, I was just going to say that I'm not really all that big a fan of these constant interviews everywhere, but in this situation, he just interviewed in front of all of council. Why would we send him back to police and personnel?
Because my only thing is, Mr. Rector just resigned right now. How do we know that this hasn't been publicized, that there's other people that want this seat? Or are we?
He stated last month that he would be interested in it.
And because this has been something that Mr. Richter has been talking about doing, and he has actually stayed on HARB as a favor to us this entire time, and we haven't gotten anybody interested in replacing him on HARB. So we finally have somebody to do that.
I have not heard it advertised here, just as we advertised all the other open positions. I mean, I didn't know Mr. Rector was leaving HARB.
Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries 7-1 with Mr. Prednick being the nay. Do we have any other openings? Mr. Crack?
There will be coming before the Police Personnel Public Safety Committee. There are 2 openings in October on the Beautification Advisory Commission. That those expire October 31st. There is a vacant alternate remaining for the Civil Service Commission, and there are 2 vacancies on the Tree Advisory Commission.
I'll make the same plea that I do every month. If there are individuals either here tonight or out there watching this at home that are interested in serving on any of the commissions, whether or not there's an open seat, I suggest that you look into it. You can contact the borough either through the website or directly, either in person or over the phone. There's an application process that you can put in an application and set forth your interest in serving on one of those boards or commissions. Mr. Kuzner?
Could I get those openings one more time?
Yes, there's a report in the tech council packet. Moving on to item 7, communications and council participation. Mr. Richter?
Mr. President, I was remiss in about 2 months ago, Dr. Sanek had sent a preliminary letter on this matter he just spoke on, and then I did just receive the letter that he alluded to, that he sent to you and copied on. So just for public edification, I did receive a letter from Dr. Sanek voicing his concern about the vacation of those particular right-of-ways.
Thank you. Ms. Mayo?
I just wanted to take a moment to wish Gene a happy birthday. He turned 60 over the weekend.
Mr. Prednick?
So I do have a letter I received from Corby Mayers, Carl Corby Mayers, who is a resident on Griffin Street. Would this be the proper time to read it and enter it into the record? There's a very long letter, so I'm going to read as best as I can here. Hello all. I'm a resident here in Phoenixville at 224 Griffin Street, and I have been living here with my sister, Diana Roberts, since her husband, who I expect many of you knew, Dr. Craig Roberts, passed a little over 6 years ago. It is due to my sister's unexpected surgery that took place yesterday that I am unable to attend this meeting in person, as she is getting out of the hospital late today, and I need to be available to help out, as she will be confined to her bed for a while. Over the past years, we have seen a lovely neighborhood street turned into a constantly used traffic bypass from the main roads because of the amount of traffic that has continued to grow and the awkward flow of traffic which has caused a traffic bottleneck at Main and Nut Road. I really can't blame the drivers. That is certainly understandable considering the traffic flow problems. If I were in the same situation in a hurry to get to work or back home, I would likely be doing the same thing. The traffic starts getting frequent every weekend earlier than 6:30 or 7 a.m. and lasts a good couple of hours in the morning. And because of the speed people travel, often in excess of 50 miles per hour, the noise alone is a bit hard to take if you are still trying to sleep. This is repeated in reverse starting at around 3:30 or 4 p.m. and continues to the constant noise and also in a danger to our children. In the mornings when, partially because of what appears to me as a short green light where the traffic on Nut Road backs up for those people who wish to turn right on South Main Street, they choose to bypass that area in the evenings because of the fact that traffic backs the same light for the people who want to turn left onto Nut Road from Main Street. The same thing happens. A left turn arrow in that direction will greatly help traffic get through that intersection. Bud Horency, our good friend and next-door neighbor, informed me that one time there was a left turn arrow there which was removed during hospital construction and was for some reason never reinstalled. I think besides installing a speed bump in these traffic light issues, if these traffic light issues could somehow be addressed, it would also help a lot in discouraging people from using Griffin Street as a bypass. I am not sure how this can be addressed. Bud seemed to think this is a PA Department of Transportation issue. We will be looking into this, and if anyone at this meeting knows how and who to contact, this information would be greatly appreciated. I don't think a speed bump would totally discourage people from using Griffin Street as a bypass, but it would at least would encourage them to slow down. Considering the amount of traffic we now get, where we often cannot back out of our driveways, and the speed people drive trying to get back to work, that is often very fast and certainly endangers the many children living, visiting, and walking near here from the nearby schools. We think installing a speed bump on this block is a very reasonable request, and we do hope this will be acted upon soon. Thank you, Carl Corby Mayers.
Thank you, Mr. Prednick. Any other council participation? Mr. Bowers?
Council President, I'm not certain, was the manager given a copy of Dr. Sanek's letter that we can
I will
enter
be
into the
handing
record?
him my copy as
Very
soon
good.
as.
Okay, great. And one other item, I was contacted by the Homeowners Association in the Riverside section of Riverwalk regarding a sign petition, permanent sign petition. And I did advise them that we are taking up under policy a matter that was maybe of interest to them. So that we were considering other studies for a stop sign within the broader community of Riverwalk. So something to address perhaps later in policy.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Mr. Kuzner?
Yes, I don't know if this resident, it's a Middle Ward resident, but I don't know if she sent the email to everybody on council. Myra, did everybody get that same? Okay, I couldn't tell if it was BCC'd or not, but the letter was lengthy, so I won't go, I won't read all of it, but it was basically a request to make it a permitted street, because there's people leaving their cars there for weeks on end, according to her. A request for curbs to be repaired, and also addressing vacant properties that have homing, is that how you say, homing pigeons? Okay, that seem to have homing pigeons that are still living there from the previous owner that are, I guess, causing a nuisance to her. So, and after, could I move on to a totally different subject too? Okay, so I had sent everybody out an email regarding the signage on the lots with pool and parking. I had showed people photographs of the various pictures, or I'm sorry, the various signs, how some are worded differently than others. I sat by the machine where people put money in, and I pretended like I just didn't know. I asked 6 people, do you have any idea what that means there on that sign with pool and parking? 5 of them did not know, 1 person knew. So also along with the photographs, you'll notice I had 2 pictures indicating that every car that had pulled into that lot pulled in the way that would get them cited. So it doesn't appear that, 1, they either understand the sign, or 2, they're reading the sign that doesn't tell them that they can't park that way. So I wanted to make a motion to temporarily suspend the, I guess if it was an ordinance line item of the ordinance that indicates people can't park that way until we, 1, get the proper signage, or have all the signs saying the same thing, and 2, I want to work on the wording. Pool-in parking or pool-in parking only is not clear enough to people, and as I hope most members of council could see, based on the picture where every car except 1 was parked a certain way, that it's not being very clear to people, and giving them a citation to me is the wrong way to tell them that they're not supposed to park that way. So my motion is to suspend it, bring it to either Parking and Steering Committee or Policy, and work on the wording of the signs so that they, again, properly relay what they're supposed to be doing. And, of course, that all the signs say the same thing.
Since there's a motion on the floor, I'll second that first, but I also wanted to I wanted to make a comment about this as well. I was just hearing today this got instituted in what time that this was not legal, because I had no idea, and most people I know didn't have any idea, because I don't even know what that kind of parking is. And I was wondering if that's something that maybe we should just reconsider the entire process, because it just doesn't, it doesn't seem to make any sense. Nobody even understands what that means, or most people don't. So I would absolutely be in favor of at least suspending it so that we can discuss it. Obviously, this happened a while back before any of us were on council, and I think it needs to be revisited.
Any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Prednick.
I mean, my main thought is that we could do things to try to help eliminate people parking the wrong way. I mean, putting cinder blocks so that they can't pull through would at least prevent people from parking the wrong way. That seems like it may be an easy fix. I agree with Mr. Kuznar that according to the pictures he took, you can see most people are not understanding really what the pull-in term means, but most of them also pull through, and the signs are just inconsistent. So, I mean, my main thing is not necessarily to suspend the policy entirely, but why can we not just get the signs corrected and put some cinder blocks to prevent people from pulling through? That seems like an easier fix than having to suspend it, go back to the drawing board, do everything again, and keep making changes to policies over and over again.
Well, the one thing I understand is that apparently the the tickets that people occasionally do get for this, we don't collect on. The judge throws that out, obviously, because we have inconsistent signs there. So, I mean, I really think we should just suspend it for now while we revisit this, and maybe we just correct the signs. Maybe that's the conclusion we come to. But I feel like it's something we really need to, we really need to be consistent at the very least.
Mr. Kuzner?
Shai, into answering your question, my other reasoning for suspending it is not just making sure the signs are consistent. Ms. Mayo had brought up earlier, I don't know how possible this is, but possibly making something like a picture or something. Pull-in parking only, like I said, I asked 6 people, 5 of them did not know what I was talking about. So that's why I would like it brought to some committee so that we could at least review the wording of the signs and make sure all the signs are consistent, and then we can bring it back once everything is good.
Ms. Mayo?
I think rather than suspending the policy per se, we could suspend giving tickets in the meantime while we work this out in policy. I don't think we need to necessarily suspend the policy, just the rating of the tickets, which we have done in other circumstances, including when we expanded the permitting for Zone A, we suspended ticket writing, which tickets they're clearly getting thrown out by the judge anyway, so why don't we just do that for right now?
Mr. Kuzner?
My purpose of suspending it was so that nobody gets a ticket. So if it makes anybody feel better, I have no problem saying that change the motion, amend the motion to suspending ticketing for pull-in parking.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so we now have an amended motion on the floor. Mr. Bowers?
Maybe not a popular comment, but so much of what we do with parking is on the fly ad hoc. I can't do this. I can't support a motion. I can't support acting on this based on an email I just received this afternoon with pictures on a subject that I don't fully understand. I'd like to see us take a breath and work through policy, straighten these things out, work towards consistency. That's just my position. I don't know that I can vote favorably on the motion tonight.
Mr. Kuzner?
Mr. Bowers, just so I could, it's not to suspend the whole thing, or it's not to get rid of it. Like I said, we're voting right now just to suspend ticketing until it goes to policy, and as of right now, the signs are inconsistent, as you saw in the pictures I was showing you. People pulled in almost at a 95%, 90% rate. I don't remember how many cars it was exactly, but a very large portion of people are opening themselves up to be incited when the signs are inconsistent. So that it's not a huge move just to temporarily suspend giving tickets for that one item is basically what I'm requesting.
I tend to agree with Mr. Bowers. We've been doing a lot of shooting from the hip on parking. I don't want to continue down that road. If this needs to be addressed and fleshed out, I'm more than happy to have that done in either the parking committee or policy. Obviously, the signs need to be corrected. They need to be consistent. That's an issue that I think staff can be instructed and can be taken care of rather quickly, I would think, Mr. Crack. I tend to agree with Mr. Bowers. We need to, if we're going to do this, we need to be considering this more for more than just a few hours. If anybody, I think everyone here works, so I didn't even have a chance really to look at it until after work, when there's not a lot of time in between then and now. So, any other discussion? Seeing none, on the motion, all those in favor?
May I ask that the motion be repeated since it was amended?
Yes. I believe, Mr. Kuznar, your motion currently is to suspend issuing tickets for front-end parking violations until such time as policy and/or the parking committee can make a recommendation for council to act.
That's correct.
Okay. So, with that being resaid, all those in favor of that motion? Aye. All those opposed? No. I think we need a roll call on that because I couldn't catch everybody.
Mr. Bowers? No. Mr. Dalton? No. Ms. Dugan? Yes. Mr. Ichter? No. Mr. Kuznar?
Yes.
Ms. Mayo? Yes. Mr. Prednick? No. Mr. Kowaleski? No. Motion fails 3-5.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Any other council communications or discussion? Seeing none,
Wait, I do have one. When will the signs be consistent? I mean, that's not going to stop people from being improperly cited. They don't understand what it means on there. But when do you think it will be, the signs will be consistent and all say the same thing?
I will work with staff tomorrow, figure out how many signs we need, get them in get the signs ordered, or the section that we need to have put in place. I don't know what the cost of that is at the moment, but we'll address it tomorrow. I don't know when we'll get the sign pieces back. It may be a week, it may be 2 weeks.
Okay. Again, I wanted the, I wanted it to go to policy because even if you do make all the signs consistent, people aren't understanding them. I told you I asked several people and they didn't understand what that sign meant. So if everybody's okay with that, I mean, I guess, this is how the system works, so.
Just to be clear, I recognize that you want to pursue this through policy for the moment, just so that everybody's on the same page. The way the language reads in the ordinance is the head-in parking language. The signs will have to reflect that same language to pass with the judge. So that's what it's going to say, at least temporarily, until such time as policy changes it, because they have to change the language in the ordinance. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Are we allowed any temporary signs, just so we don't have to go invest in signs and maybe change them later?
There's only so much real estate on some of the signs, and I think that's if you look at the pictures closely, there are larger ones that actually have a band on it that says headed parking, and there are smaller signs that have less real estate to put additional information, but we'll do our best to make it work.
No, I mean, is there anything like temporary that we can put on top of it for now? Rather than having to go
on the fly, I don't have something, but I'll meet with Mr. Neese and Mr. Watson tomorrow, and we'll come up with something.
Moving on to new business, I don't believe we have any tonight, at least not under item 8. Resolutions, again, I don't believe we have any, so we'll move right on to item 10, public hearings. What is council's pleasure with item A under 10?
I'll make a motion to open a public hearing on ordinance amendment to repeal Chapter 23 Stormwater Management and replace with a new Chapter 23 Stormwater Management.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ector to open up the public meeting, second by Mr. Dalton. What is council's pleasure? And seeing no comments, all those in favor? Aye. So I'll open up the public hearing at 7:48 and turn it over to Solicitor Kilkenny.
Thank you very much, President Kowaleski. I'll have marked as B, Borough 1, a copy of the advertisement of this public hearing dated August 25th, 2014, the Pottstown Mercury. Marked as B2, Borough 2, the ordinance itself addressing the stormwater management new regulations. And B3, recommendations from all committees and planning agencies. This ordinance that council has before us, it places into effect a renumbering of a chapter and also putting into effect new stormwater regulations as are required by state law in every municipality in the Commonwealth. I know staff, my office, and Remington, Vernon, and Beach had worked exclusively and with a lot of effort in tailoring these to a borough meaning Phoenixville, understanding that we have a lot of impervious surface. We're an older community and built out, and making this that it's realistic to, one, protect the environment, but two, not make it so onerous on future development. So that being said, there would be an opportunity for council comment, public comment, if council wants to continue the public hearing or close the public hearing.
Why don't we open up the public participation? I'll invite any member of the public that wishes to speak on this issue, which would be the stormwater management ordinance, to come forward. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close that public participation portion and open up council participation. Mr. Bowers?
As Council President, I'd like to ask if perhaps the Borough Manager could just give us a little background on, in practice, how this ordinance would apply. Would apply to would apply to applications currently in Planning Commission but not approved? Certainly any application not made to Planning Commission would be subject to, but how would it apply to applications in that stage prior to approval?
The rules that we're following is that you authorize scheduling and advertising on August 12th. Any application that preceded the August 12th date would be entitled to use the previous ordinance. Anything after August 12th that comes in has to adhere to the new guidelines.
Any other council participation or discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing, if that is council's pleasure.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Mayo, second by Ms. Dugan to close the public hearing. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Public hearing is closed as of 7:52, we'll call it. What is council's pleasure with regard to the stormwater ordinance?
So I'd like to make a motion to accept the ordinance amendment to repeal Chapter 23 Stormwater Management and replace it with a new Chapter 23 Stormwater Management.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Mr. Bowers. Any other discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item B, what is council's pleasure?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing on amendment of Chapter 15, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Part 4, General Parking Regulations, Section 15406, Handicap Parking Zones, Section 15411, Parking Prohibited on Portions of Certain Highways during street sweeping hours from March 1st to December 31st.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Prednick. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of opening the public hearing? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. We'll open the public meeting as of 7:54, we'll call it. Mr. Kilkenny?
Thank you very much, President Kovaleski. Again, I would, for this public hearing related to the amendments to Chapter 15, I'd like marked as B1 a copy of the advertisement of this public hearing in the Pottstown Mercury dated August 25th, 2014. As B2, a copy of the ordinance amendments itself. And as B3, a recommendation from all committees and/or planning agencies related to these amendments. Perhaps Mr. Crack could give a brief explanation of the changes.
Sure. In Section 1, it is removing 3 handicap signs throughout the borough that are no longer needed, one on 2nd Avenue, one on Church Street, and one on Gay Street. And it is adding 2 in the borough, one on Columbia Avenue and one on 1st Avenue. And then the second change that's occurring here is, if you recall, you approved previously the street sweeping of High Street on the north side, but after that information was put out, there were some concerns from the residents about both the number of days and the times for that. So This change basically takes and breaks that portion of the ordinance into a Section A and a Section B. Section A is all of the current streets and the current times, and then Section B is specifically to High Street on the north side between the hours of 8:30 a.m. And 9:30 a.m. on Fridays during the season. And the season is between March 1 to December 31 of any given year.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. With that, I'll open up the public participation portion of this public hearing and invite any member of the public to come forward if they wish to speak on this issue. Seeing none, we'll close the public participation portion of this hearing, and I will open up council participation and discussion. Does any council member have any discussion? Mr. Richter?
I'll just make one comment on the last piece, the street sweeping of High Street. There's been lots of back and forth on this, in particular amongst council members and even the mayor, as well as some residents. I was the one who brought this up to begin with, so I accept responsibility of that. But part of that, much of that, was due to walking the streets and talking with the residents who were basically sick of the trash that continues to accumulate on that street all the time. I think the only way to resolve the issue is with constant street sweeping. By adjusting the hours and the day, I think we hit it at the most optimal time. And I stand by the recommendation of staff and what both Mr. Bowers and I have discussed. I think this is a win-win for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Richter. Any other discussion? Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I agree with Councilman Ichter about keeping the streets clean and everything. But what concerns me is the undue hardship that's going to be placed on the hundreds of residents up there on High Street between Dayton and Taylor, and the movement of their vehicles. A borough staff member expressed to me, that it would be wise to have the streets swept on alternate days. One side on one day, say the street to be swept on Wednesdays, and then the other side of the street to be swept on a Thursday or a Friday or whatever. This way, we reduce the parking issues that will arise. We'll reduce that in half, and I think it'll be more beneficial to the residents in dealing with this particular concern.
Any other, any other council participation? Seeing none, what is council's pleasure with regard to the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Mr. Richter, and I'll give that to Mr. Dalton for a second by a hair. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. We'll close the public hearing as of 7:57. What is council's pleasure?
I'll make a motion to adopt the ordinance amendment to Chapter 15, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Part 4, General Parking Regulations, Section 15406, Handicap Parking Zones, and Section 15411, Parking Prohibited on portions of certain highways during street sweeping hours from March 1st to December 31st.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton. Mr. Mayor, do you have any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Mayor.
Again, as I expressed my concern with the parking scenario that will unfold, my question to the solicitor would be, is there a difference if the mayor does not sign the ordinance versus a veto? Obviously, since it was 8-0, a veto wouldn't hold. But if the mayor does not sign the ordinance, is that just?
Per the Borough Code, it becomes effective under an operational law. I can check that Borough Code provision, but I will, let me go ahead, check the Borough Code, and I will get back to you in a couple minutes.
Thank you.
I'll check that provision.
Thank you. Moving on to item 11, reports of committees, boards, and commissions. Planning Commission. No action. Okay. Yes, Mr. Crack, why don't you explain that?
Okay, what this is a, if you recall, at the last meeting, you actually approved the subdivision land development plans pending an approval of the zoning hearing board. That's not our normal practice for approving plans. We do that by resolution specifically. And so this is the resolution to what you've already approved. That's all this is the resolution that formalizes what you did at the last meeting. It would be prudent to do a motion and move it forward.
Seeing no action, we'll move on to Regional Planning Commission.
Actually, I was half paying attention, sorry about that. Can we make a motion to accept that? Okay, so I'd like to make the motion to consider the resolution for final approval of the subdivision and land development plan for 136 Columbia Ave, as Planning Commission recommended the approval of their action memo in July by 4-0.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Richter. Any discussion on this? Mr. Prednick?
I'm still trying to pull up the paper, but I remember going through it before. Do we have any elaboration on why they have all the waivers in there? I know that there was quite a bit.
Any development has a number of waivers. Those are taken into consideration during the planning commission process between the planning consultant, the engineering consultant, and those recommendations were favorable to those two consultants, and then obviously it bubbles up through planning commission and then on to you. The variances are what they had to go through zoning hearing board, and the zoning hearing board ultimately gave them the variances that they were seeking as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Bowers?
Council President, can the manager confirm if this subject was on the zoning hearing board's agenda last meeting?
What transpired is your council meeting was on the 12th, and I believe the zoning hearing board was either the 13th or the 20th of August. We did receive the information, I believe it's in your packet. The zoning hearing board recommendations were to give them the waivers that the variances that they were seeking. What you did at the previous meeting was out of the ordinary by approving by giving an approval pending the zoning hearing board decision, and you had some debate about whether that was something that you should do, but council ultimately did that. This is the document, though, that goes on the recorded plans. That's why it's important to have the resolution itself. You've approved the plans. Whether or not there's a resolution that goes with it is what you're up to at this point in time. I'm encouraging you to move it forward. This is an administrative act, but ultimately you have to vote to decide to do that.
So again, consider looking at the timing of all the pieces that need to fall into place at this point. Zoning hearing board would meet again in September?
They actually met today is the 9th. They would normally meet next week, but I don't believe there's anything on their agenda for next week. They only meet when they have something to meet about. This particular subdivision land development cleared the hurdles of the zoning hearing board. If you recall, they went to the zoning hearing board
They went to the zoning hearing
in
board
July,
in July,
and the
in
results
August
weren't
meeting.
provided until their meeting, which occurred after your council meeting. So you didn't know what the answers were at the time, but I went ahead and approved the subdivision land development plans conditioned upon approval from the zoning hearing board.
And that approval has been given by the zoning hearing board?
the variances that they were seeking in total were approved by the zoning hearing board, yes. The thing that I guess I should, solicitors can explain that next process. There is the ability for an appeal of the zoning hearing board decision by interested parties. I don't know, off the top of my head, I don't know what that time frame is. I suspect it's 30 days.
It's 30 days from the written decision, yes.
Okay, so given that that appeal is still legally possible, then we do need to keep the language in this resolution stating that zoning relief provided by the zoning hearing board must be final and past the appeal period.
That's why that number 3 item is there.
Okay. Thank you. I was uncertain as to whether this subject came out approved from the zoning hearing board.
Any other council participation? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Excuse me, Mr. Kovaleski, I have the answer to the mayor's question before, if related to his action on the ordinance.
Please.
It's to the public here. I'm looking at section 48301.3 of the Borough Code, reference to enactment, approval, veto of ordinances effective date. So section A1 here goes into every ordinance enacted by council shall be presented to the mayor for the mayor's approval. As a matter of law, presented to the mayor shall be deemed to mean delivery to the mayor by hand delivery or certified mail. If the mayor approves the ordinance, which he's indicated he's not inclined to do at this time, he or she will sign it. If the mayor does not approve the ordinance, the mayor shall return it with his or her objections, which shall be entered upon the minutes to the council at the next scheduled meeting occurring at least 10 days after the meeting at which the ordinance was enacted by council, which could be at the October meeting if you wanted to. But say he chooses not to take action, chooses not to return it. If any ordinance shall not be returned by the mayor at council's next scheduled meeting occurring at least 10 days after its presentation to the mayor, the ordinance shall have full force and effect as if it had been approved by the mayor. So if you get it and choose to do nothing, it will eventually take effect. If you want to, make comments and return it, that essentially counts as a veto, and then there would be an overriding process. So that's up to you. What you at the next meeting? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kilkenny. Continuing with the agenda, Regional Planning Commission.
Okay, I would like to announce we chose Therakoff Design and Planning as our new land planning consultants. We chose between 3 land planning consultants. I do apologize, I forget the names of the others, but we chose this particular consulting company because frankly they had a member or a resident of Phoenixville that worked for them, whereas the other 2 didn't. One was from Westchester, had no real connections with Phoenixville, and neither did the other. So I was just keeping in mind the I guess I don't want to call it downside of the regional comprehensive plan, but as a lot of people know, it directs a lot of attention that can sometimes be a heavy burden on Phoenixville. So I chose that particular chose those particular consultants mainly because they had more invested interest in Phoenixville.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzner. Historical Architectural Review Board.
Mr. President, I'm going to present these tonight. Item number 1 is the approval of the awning request for 148 Bridge Street, and I'm going to also combine that with number 2, the sign and awning at 20 South Main Street. I'll make a motion to approve both of those items.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ector, second by Ms. Dugan. Council discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Mr. President, I'm breaking out number 3 because there was a letter that Mr. Crack provided to council today from Mr. Carnival regarding 316 Bridge Street. Backstory on that one was coming out of Harb, this was, the denial was accepted 4-2, with 2 members voting against denial. There was some question as to whether or not the building really truly represents the historical look that that part of the Harb district is going for. There was an original plan submitted 9/3/13 and accepted by council 9/10/13, which shows the building mainly consisting of brick. This current request that was presented to Harb yesterday basically makes the entire building have a stucco look to it. After reviewing some of the Harb guidelines, there is arguments that can be made, in my opinion, to give us as the governing body the ability to state the materials that are acceptable for that building, which is currently brick on the bottom and is under construction on the top floors. And that is the reason the denial was made 4-2. So I'll make a motion to, actually, I won't make a motion at all. A non-action is denial, so I will not make a motion on that one.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to item number 4, the Harb board recommended denial 6-0 of the signed billboard request for 436 Bridge Street. And I'll make a motion to, I guess again, I will not provide any action on that, as that would be deemed a denial unless anyone would differ.
I just asked the solicitor to confirm that if we take no action, it is a deemed denial rather than deemed approval.
I am not sure, so I would actually recommend that you affirm the Harb's decision. I would recommend a motion for that, and then you're in a safer legal position. That's what I would recommend.
That makes sense.
I'll go ahead and edify that then. On item number 3, I'll make a motion to deny the addition renovation request for 316 Bridge Street as recommended by the Harb Action Memo.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Ms. Dugan. On that motion, seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the denial? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
And then on item number 4, I will make a motion to deny the signed billboard request for 436 Bridge Street as recommended by the Harb Action Memo.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Ms. Dugan. On that motion, any council discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the denial? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Richter. Police Personnel Committee?
Nothing, we didn't have a meeting. I did notice in the police report, I was looking at the miles per gallon of some of the vehicles versus others. I'm only going to assume that these are SUVs that are, because some were at like 5 miles per gallon, 6 miles per gallon versus others that were at 14. Is that mostly just SUVs versus regular patrol cars, or?
I wouldn't think so. Our SUVs have the exact same motors as our cruisers, our sedans. So you're looking at potentially like a 1 mile per gallon difference. Basically, the drivetrain is the same and the chassis are the same. They're practically identical vehicles.
So just police officers with different driving habits, possibly?
I'd have to review it. If we had, if there were vehicles that were, if we had a bad accident, like a 3-car pileup, and there was a vehicle that was idling for a long period of time, or if they were just about to get gas before they put their mileage in, you know, or they just got gas and they haven't really driven any miles, there's kind of an ebb and flow. So we have to, when we look at that, we look at it over a course of months, as opposed to just the snapshot of this month. Because even my own car, you know, sometimes it's at 18 and sometimes it's at 22. And it literally depends on, did I just fuel it up or was I just about to fuel it up? How many miles you went. it affects it, but 5 miles to the gallon is bad. That's real bad. I'd have to look at the report to see which vehicle that was. Do you have a number?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Mr. President, can you clarify which report it is?
Yeah, it's the police report that's actually, I don't know if I think it was just in the packet itself.
If I may, so we can keep the meeting going. why
It'll
don't we
take me a
ask
sec.
for-
I got it up here right now, if that's okay. It just says car number 8 was at 5 miles per gallon. And the others were that were low were about 9 and 8. But
Yeah, that car, somebody may have forgotten to put a mileage at the end of a shift, which skewed it, and we don't have any car that gets that bad. 9 is probably about as bad as we get. But I'll look into that and I'll let you know.
all right, thank you.
Parks and Recreation Committee?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move to bundle items number 1 through 6, the temporary community events. So I'll motion to approve 1 through 6.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Ms. Dugan. Just for those at home that don't have the agenda in front of them, or that would be a temporary community event permits for the Halloween parade, for a J.C.'s Burn Off the Bird 5K and 1 mile walk, a citizen advocacy annual 10K and 5K races, a race for Field of Warmth, a J.C.'s movie in the park, and Kiwanis Community Day in Reeves Park. Any discussion on the motion?
I'd just like to say I love the continued events that we keep seeing here, and I think we need to do everything we can to support these organizations. It's although we're a little heavy on the runs this month, it's great to see these events still wanting to use Phoenixville.
Any other discussion? Mr. Bowers?
Would just say the same. It's great. I mean, there's 4 events here. Well, 4 events here, two occurring each on the same weekend, or on consecutive weekends. So, boy, just what fabulous use of the town and the resources that the town has. It's wonderful to see.
Absolutely. October is going to be a busy month, it looks like. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0 with Ms. Mayo out of the room. Chief?
Have your answer. Car 8 is our Expedition. That car, as I suspected, it was idle time. That is the vehicle that we transport our scales in, and if anybody saw, it was out on Route 113 over the last couple of weeks or so. They'll take that vehicle out there, they open up the back of it, and there's a computer and there's a printout, and they pull trucks over all day long. So what happened is that vehicle is probably sitting for most of an entire shift idling while they were using it to do truck inspections for the shift. So it's a matter of idle time as opposed to the fuel mileage.
I appreciate you doing that. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't like a faulty engine or something and it was just overlooked. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one.
Lastly, there is an item 8 that did come out of committee that's not reflected in our council packet. I don't know if it's up on the screen. That's to consider the approval of design and installation of an 18-hole mini-disc golf course in Reservoir Park. This item was brought to committee by Mr. Shane Dilworth from the Rec Board. He is basically asking that he be given the ability to solicit the monies necessary for building such a golf course. He's asking for absolutely no funds from the borough. He's just asking to be able to use the borough space to do this. There's apparently a growing community in the mini disc golf world. He has some great sponsorship opportunities with local businesses. I personally think it's a fantastic idea. It utilizes park space up at Reservoir Park that couldn't otherwise be utilized. Mr. Crack, Mr. Watson, Ms. Gibbons, Mr. Dilworth, and I met up at Reservoir Park and kind of reviewed the plans with the potential installer. So right now he's just looking for approval from council to to move forward with the plan. So I'll make a motion to approve the design and installation of the 18-hole mini disc golf course in Reservoir Park.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Prednick. On the motion, any discussion?
I have just one thing to add on this one. The fact that I love that they're actually going to use that space or try to use that space without any cost to us. So clearly, I'm going to be in favor of that. So
I didn't have the benefit of being in the committee, so I just have a question or two. Will this involve clearing of any of the existing trees in the park to accommodate?
Everything would stay exactly as is. What gets installed is basically a metal basket on a pole that's installed in concrete, so there's no way that somebody can rip it out unless they had a backhoe, I guess. And also what they call a T-pad, which there's some discussion what that would be, but it would be some sort of cement or otherwise pad where you throw from. This golf community likes having trees in the way and other obstacles, so they find that they'll be able to play into the tree area and around the edges, not affecting around the gazebo areas up there and where the community gardens are.
Yeah, Frisbee golf, I believe. Thank you, Mr. Richter. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. For clarification, we did have an item 7 on the list, which was there, but there was no actually submission from the Kiwanis with regard to that, so I don't believe it's
There was included in the TCE event a letter from a member of the Kiwanis requesting that waiver. However, it didn't pass committee, and therefore I was not bringing it to the floor.
Okay. Thank you. Finance?
since most of these are either typical or we've already talked about them, I'm going to bundle all 5 of these. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2014 prepaids dated 7/6/2014 to 8/9/2014 in the amount of $1,081,955.42. Approve the 2014 prepaids ACH dated 7/31/2014 in the amount of $2,626.14. Budget increase request 2014-19 of $16,750 to Public Works capital projects, capital improvements from General Capital Project Fund, from the use of fund balance, for fencing at the compost site. The budgeting increase request 2014-20 of $2,000 to legal professional service from general fund, use of fund balances for property appraisal. And finally, the budget transfer request 2014-10 of $10,000 from solid waste tipping fees to recycling vehicle expense for vehicle maintenance.
Motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Ms. Mayo. On the motion, council discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you, Ms. Dugan. Infrastructure?
Council President, I would like to ask, and with your consideration and the manager's consideration, if we could pull forward from the manager's report 2 items. One, consider staff recommendation on the leak detection services RFP, and second, the consider staff recommendation on the 2014 street paving. Would you entertain bringing that forward to this section of the agenda?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Crack, would you care to discuss those items? Sure. I'll put you on the spot a little bit.
As has been discussed earlier in the year, there is, for good reason, great concern about the amount of water that we make and measure versus the amount of water that we bill for, and there's a disparity there that is rather significant. And so, per council's request, we put together an RFP package and put that out on the street to seek out firms that would be interested in providing an analysis of our water distribution system for the borough. What you have before you is the recommendation to award the leak detection services and water loss management contract to Matchpoint Water Asset Management, Inc., out of Wilmington, North Carolina, in the amount of $11,076.78. And I believe the information was in your packet, the RFP that they provided. There was only one area where that dollar amount could go up, and we would probably pursue that if we got enough information and wanted to do that. They provide the report in a format that isn't necessarily consistent with our GIS, and so they have a caveat in there that if we want the information put into our GIS system, there would be a fee for that. They did not identify what that fee was, but we'll take a look at the information first, and then, if need be, come back with a recommendation whether we want the additional data in that specific format. They provide it in a format that's consistent with Google Maps. Whether or not our county GIS folks can convert that or not, I don't know the answer as I sit here today. So that it's a not to exceed number based on the number of feet of pipe that we have in the system, based on various sizes. And so the only caveat would be that $1 amount. I don't know what that would be at this point.
Excuse me. So that we can, I think, further open this up for discussion across council, I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendation to award the leak detection services and water loss management contract to Matchpoint Water Assets Management in an amount not to exceed $12,000.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Mr. Prednick. On that motion, Mr. Bowers?
Is the conversion of the data to a format consistent with GIS? Are you suggesting that's it's an insurmountable or an we can't define what the cost of that would be at this point?
It's just I haven't asked the company that question. I think it's on page 6. They identify empirical data on a map that is a Google Earth map. I don't know what a KLM file is.
Google Earth import file, so it's a set of maps, layers, and data.
Okay. With GIS, I know I'm not savvy in that world of how they convert, but there's a format that, I guess there's two formats that GIS uses, and forgive me, I don't know what the actual term of that is, but it's a mapping structure on how the planes, when they fly over, lay out the plane of the GIS mapping, and then they layer those tax parcels on top of that. I can get that information, but at this juncture, what we're really interested in is the reporting that you see on page 4, page 5. That level of detail is what's really important to us at the moment. What will become more important on the flip side of this is if, in fact, we begin to pursue fixing pipes and assessing that information, we would want to put it into the GIS system. As I sit here and I look at this, assess the information that's here, for $11,000, they're doing 200 and some thousand feet of pipe and giving us a mapping system for that $11,076. I can't believe that a KMF file, if it can't be absorbed by the county's GIS, that it would be extraordinarily expensive to convert it to whatever else that type of file is.
You can't A KLM file, doesn't get too technical, but a KLM file is different than a JS file.
I'm sorry?
A KLM file, without going through the conversion process, cannot be directly imported. So there will be a fee, as they stated. I agree, just from past experience, it's not going to be significant.
Okay.
So is the,
I was, and forgive me, Dana, for this, but is 12,000 going to be enough to keep us in the range? Gene had mentioned that there was an area that was somewhat questionable. Is that?
I suppose until that's defined, I just, yeah, I didn't, what we know is that the 11 isn't likely to be enough to convert the data to a format to be accepted into our GIS. So until we know specifically, I certainly wouldn't want to put a number out there, I suppose.
Well, isn't this something that we can always come back and revisit later? Like, we're already starting with, you know, we have a starting amount of money, and if we can, like, have that conversation at a later date?
Yes, Mr. Bowers? I didn't know if you had a question or if you were leaving your mic on. Mr. Richter?
I always get concerned when there's only one answer to an RFP, but I do agree with the borough manager that at that price I was happily surprised. I don't know what we do to get more answers to an RFP, especially like that. My concerns are completely different with the next item we're going to talk about, but for that item, I think that's a very reasonable price, and even though we did only get one response, I'm inclined to say, you know, it might be a good first step.
Mr. Bowers?
And again, this is a question, I'll just throw it out there, and I don't know that we have an answer, or it's critical that we have an answer at this point, but given all the construction, especially the boring and work that's taking place along the French Creek area, does that type of construction activity impact their ability to conduct this survey?
We would probably, because that's where our 16-inch comes through in several locations, excuse me, we would probably sit down with them, and we will do this, sit down with them and recommend certain locations at different times of the day and night, because Nut Road, as an example, would be more of a nighttime because there's less traffic volume. Obviously, when I looked at the package, they've done a number of cities and what have you, and you know that there's construction projects that are going on all the time. I would have to believe, and we'll ferret this out, but I have to believe that they've already got that kind of stuff in the back of their mind. They're going to look and see where the construction is in the borough and make the assessments on where they want to set up or their hydrophones or whatever it is that they're using in specific locations to get that data.
Mr. Prednick?
My only one comment is just on the, again, on the conversion to the ArcGIS format. Just if we can ask them for a quote, just so that we have a price for them for later on. I mean, we don't have to act upon it, we can leave it later on, but at least this way we have some sort of price in the books. They don't come back and try to charge us more later.
Any other comment? Seeing Mr. Bowers?
No, thank you. This is a great conclusion to a lot of work, and a lot of concern expressed all across council to find a solution to help us identify where our system may have some issues and create that map. And this will literally create that map for what we need to tackle and consider for repairs in the future. So, again, want to thank staff, sincerely thank staff for all the hard work that went into getting us to this point today.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Crack, can you explain the next item? Mr. Bowers?
I'm sorry, Council President, just to clarify, the funding for this would be from water capital, correct?
That's correct.
Very good.
For what you just voted on, yes. The next item is consider staff recommendation to award the 2014 street paving contract to Cedar Springs Construction Company of Pottstown, PA, in the amount of $140,725. This is a rebid from last month. This was the only bid that we received. We had changed the information as to expand the number of vendors that could come in. If you recall, the last version of the documents contained specific language that was rather limiting. We ultimately found out, though, that because of that limitation, if we went beyond that contract to use somebody else, we would not be eligible for our liquid fuels. Excuse me, thank you. Our liquid fuels funding. So based on that, we rebid the project to make it less daunting for the contractors, and was surprised that we only received the one bid application. There should have been no reason why we shouldn't have gotten more contractors involved. It really wasn't anything about timing. The bid was out long enough for this type of project. There's not a lot of work involved. It's basically time and materials. So it's not, it's something that a contractor would put together in a matter of a couple of days. We reduced the limitations as it relates to school buses. We reduced the limitations as to time, as to how much time it was needed to complete it. We opened up the bid and still only got one. I don't have an answer to that. Mr. Watson doesn't have an answer to that. And you have a choice tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Mr. Bowers?
I think some concern is we met, of course, on August 12th. And on the August 12th meeting, it was assessed that we were not going to move forward based on the responses we received. There's such a discrepancy between the proposals of each of the bidders in that case. So on the 12th, we understood that, evening of the 12th, we understood that we had to go back to the drawing board and rewrite the RFP or RFQ. So I guess feeling like how long could this have really been on the street and in the hands of companies to fully assess and prepare a response for? Concern is that they maybe had less than 10 business days to respond to the revised RFQ?
Well, the answer is it was 2 weeks. We gave, I believe it might have been 13 or 14 days. In this type of a project, you could give them 40 days. I don't know that we'd have gotten any more bidders if we'd had it out there for 40 days. Maybe so, maybe not. This is a time and materials. We're providing the materials. So all that the contractor is providing in their bid is how much time they think they're going to need for their milling machines, and how much time they think they're going to need for the actual paving and rolling. Those are the only items that are contained that they would have to put a bid package together for. It's a small project by comparison. It's something that we felt that any of the companies should put a package together for. It's busy work is what it really is this time of the year. The key though is we're providing the raw materials and having that trucked in. These prices are merely their machines and their person's time. So I guess you could make the argument if we'd give them 30 days or 40 days, maybe we would have got some more in there. I don't believe it. We see these things all the time, and 2 to 3 weeks for a project like this is really all that's necessary. But I understand your argument. I understand your concerns from that perspective. I'm sorry.
Mr. Brodnick?
Are we running into any sort of weather-related deadline?
You are. Brian can help me out on this, but basically what happens after about the middle of November is you get into a scenario where the plant starts shutting down, and you have to have the engineer affirm that I believe the temperature it's either 34 and rising or 42 and rising.
Well, typically in these type projects, PennDOT limits it till the end of October 31st being your end date. If you do press pass it, then there are temperature-sensitive marks for laying the asphalt, and it is 35 and rising.
So do we then run the risk that if we delay this, let's say to October, and vote then, that potentially we don't have enough?
Just as a point of order, I think we should have a motion on the table if we're going to continue discussion, just like we did the last one, would be my recommendation, if you entertain that.
I'll entertain a motion at this point if someone wants to make it. Motion by Ms. Mayo, second by Mr. Prednick to award the street paving contract to Cedar Springs Construction Company. With that, we'll let discussion continue. Mr. Prednick? No. I was saying, I apologize. Mr. Crack asked who the second was. I was going to let Mr. Watson continue. I apologize for that.
Well, I think it's about it.
Okay.
It is, again, PennDOT has a end time for these type projects, but you can get an extension, and then it becomes temperature sensitive.
Thank you. Mr. Prednick?
Sorry, so my follow-up question was then, if we do delay this to October and vote on it then, are we running into a chance where we might potentially not finish all the streets in time? Is that a potential risk you see?
You run that risk. I mean, you saw last winter, and you got, I'm not sure, I'm hearing bad things about this winter coming up. So you always run the risk when you get into anything before Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving.
Just, Mr. Watson and I have talked about this as well. We don't like the fact that there's only one bid either. I mean, that's just, you don't like those scenarios. The previous package, that amount of money is going to get you some really good empirical data, and there's some logic into approving that contract. We've talked about postponing this until springtime, rather than rush it in. Our recommendation is based on the fact that we have a valid bid that came in, albeit it's the only one, but it's council can say, you know what, let's just move this thing to 2015 and not do these streets in a hurry rather than not get a good bid. I shouldn't say that. That's not the right answer. Not getting enough bids to have a comparison from.
Mr. Richter?
I want to get these streets done as much as the next person, but I with no basis of comparison, I can't say that we can't save the taxpayers some money on this one, and I for that reason, I won't support this. I recognize that, we've had that list, and we keep crossing out the year on that list, and we want the list done, but I don't know at what cost right now, so I won't support this.
Any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Bowers?
Is there anything that precludes us from actually, issuing the RFQ to companies? It is actively issuing the RFQ to companies.
Well, this
rather
isn't,
than they just come and do a portal or view our website or otherwise hear about our RFQ.
well, this isn't an RFQ or an RFP. This is an actual bidding process. We have to use specific forms provided by PennDOT. What we don't do is we didn't go into the PennDOT bidding process. That would be, nobody wants to go down that road. So we properly advertise it as a bid. As is typical, we make phone calls and and advise companies that we know that do this, that there's a bid out, and here's the information and where you go to get that information, so they have access to it. They're following the bids. We did receive other phone calls, I know that, from at least 2 other companies, but why they didn't submit a bid package, we don't know. We don't solicit, and we don't keep a running inventory of firms that do this specific type of work, if that's your question, though.
Any other discussion from council? Seeing none, all those in favor of awarding the bid? Aye. Opposed? Motion fails 2-6, with Ms. Mayo and myself being the aye votes. Anything else from infrastructure?
Nothing else. Thank you for allowing us to pull those 2 items.
Economic development? Policy?
That light's actually starting to get to me, the blinking one. So, a couple things here. I'd like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider an ordinance of the Borough of Phoenixville, Chester County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 22, the subdivision and land development, Part 3, subdivision control, enforcement, and impact statements of Section 22305, impact statements of the Code of Ordinances of the Borough of Phoenixville, as recommended in committee, 4-0.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Perednik. Council's, any discussion or comments from council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Having thought a little bit about number 2, I wasn't not fully satisfied with that. I'd like to re-examine that within policy again, which is our signs and definitions. So I don't necessarily have to move it forward, correct? I could send it right back.
You can send it back to committee unless
I'm gonna
someone else
recommend
makes a
that
motion on
I'm
that.
going to send back, yeah.
Technically, I think it's a motion to refer back to.
Would it be a motion to refer?
refer
So I'd
to
like to make a
committee.
motion to refer scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider the ordinance of the Borough of Phoenixville, Chester County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 27 zoning, Part 2 definitions, Section 27-202 definitions, Section 27-602 noise, and Section 27-606 signs of the Code of Ordinances of the Borough of Phoenixville.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Perednik. On the motion to refer back to committee. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0 with Ms. Dugan out of the room.
I would like to make a motion to consider scheduling and advertising a public hearing to consider an ordinance of the Borough of Phoenixville, Chester County, Pennsylvania, adding a new Part 10 litter, refuse, rubbish, and garbage on sidewalks to Chapter 6 of the Streets and Sidewalks of the Code of Ordinances of the Borough of Phoenixville.
A second?
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Bowers. On the motion, any council? Mr. Richter?
Since this is just to advertise, I'll go ahead and vote for it, but I would say that I want to, make sure that our businesses are well aware of what we're trying to accomplish in this, and that there's not undue pressure put on them by this ordinance, because I could foresee that. So hopefully the businesses will be made aware of this and come out to the public hearing so that we can have a greater discussion before we move forward.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Did have a question about 4 and 5. Would these be motions, or is this?
It would be a motion. You would make the motion to instruct the mayor, or recommend the mayor request
Would like to make a motion to request the mayor have the police department conduct a study for stop signs at Riverwalk Drive and Winding River Lane, as recommended in Committee 4-0.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Ms. Mayo. On the motion, seeing no discussions. Oh, Mr. Bowers.
Sure. I think we ended up in this spot in large part because we were presented with a permanent sign request at policy, and that permanent sign request was so near an intersection that had a stop sign that we felt that any study, any consideration of stop sign at that location probably wouldn't be strongly supported or proven by any traffic study to be necessary. We looked broadly at Riverwalk Drive, and felt that this was really the midpoint between Black Rock Road and Bateman, a section that's probably, I don't know, 3,000, certainly more than 3,000 feet long, and there is no stop sign through that entire length of roadway, and that this, if this were to be recommended, would be the location that we hope would show that the speed is the greatest, both on an inbound and an outbound direction, and hopefully would prove that that intersection is the best candidate for the four-way stop.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Mayor, please accept that as our recommendation that you do so.
And then lastly, I would like to make another motion to recommend to request the mayor have the police department conduct a study for a speed table on Griffin Street between Main Street and Gay Street.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Prednick on the motion. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I'd just like to make a few remarks on this. On a regular basis, members of the community approach the chief and myself and say that on such and such an intersection, people constantly blow the stop sign, have an officer there. On such and such a street, people are consistently speeding. On this particular 200 block of Griffin Street, we have 5 homes. One side is completely the back of the Phoenixville Hospital. I don't doubt that this has become a pass-through and that on occasion individuals would be speeding on that block. My thoughts are that it's clear to the chief and I that a study will not produce the results that would justify a speed hump. So I think what's before council would be, does council want to spend the thousands of dollars to put a speed hump on that block? Now, we're going to do what council directs us to do, but I just wanted to point that out. I much rather use the manpower and the time to perhaps, inform our officers, inform our staff to monitor or sit at that location during the said hours and, ticket people. Perhaps that would be a more suitable response to this and deterrent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Prednick?
Mr. Mayor, you have a valid point, and I agree with you on the first part that the traffic study would not be fitting. I personally live on that street, actually further down the Griffin Street on the 300 block, so this does not affect my specific area, but I do know that on Griffin Street, the 3 sections that are stopped by stop signs, we regularly observe people going over 50 miles an hour, and I would say most parts of the day. I have witnessed it myself in the morning on the way to work, parked on the side, people flying by me. As I'm trying to look up something in my bag, just zooming past me at 50 miles an hour. I would agree with you that stationing an officer and ticketing will potentially help. My only concern is, that's a residual effect, and maybe for a few months afterwards, people calm down and they don't speed, but then they start back up again, and we have the same issue again. I also don't like the idea too much of our officers sitting there waiting and watching for tickets. I think they have a lot of better things to do than just sitting there. That's just my opinion. The residents have, Mr. Bud Horselli came here tonight I read the letter from Corby. I've personally spoken to all the residents there, with the exception of one on that street, that all unanimously agree that they feel a speed bump would have been a tremendous help. They pay the taxes. I think we're talking about a $2,000 to $3,000 expense. I honestly would agree and say, you know, can we not do the traffic study and put a speed bump on that road and give the residents what they're looking for? That would be my opinion, and I'm open to discussion before making a motion. If you guys, if members of council have an opinion on that.
Yeah, well, it's a good perspective since you live there, you know.
Mr. Richter?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question that I've asked among council members, but my concern is if we, and also to the chief, if we were to put a speed bump on Griffin, the streets like Anderson and City Line and some of the other ones that don't have speed bumps, I just foresee the traffic kind of shifting to those other streets, and then we have those streets asking for speed bumps too. Has there been any discussion as far as that's concerned?
I would concur with your analysis, but to my knowledge, nobody has approached myself on the speed humps in that area. And with all due respect, Mr. Prednick, 50 miles an hour is a bit out there. I mean, if you're not using, you know, the radar gun or something. But I am conceding that I'm sure there are people out there who speed, and if they don't speed on that street, or we, you know, focus on that street, they're going to go to some other street. And also, it has not been an area of accidents or anything of that nature.
Mr.
The traffic study, is that just a traffic count, or is that actually speed count?
Well, what the traffic study will tell us is how many vehicles travel that road in any given 24-hour period of time, the speed of the vehicles that were traveling that road. It'll break down to us, you know, if 1,400 cars went there, this is when this many cars usually goes, this many car goes. How many cars were speeding? Of those cars, how many of them were speeding in excess of 10 miles an hour? These are all part of the criteria for getting the speed hump in the first place. So we'll have that breakdown for you, and then it'll tell you the percentage of cars. Because there could, at any given time, somebody be ripping down any road, and that would more or less be an anomaly. Now, if 40% of the cars were doing 50 miles an hour down that road, we would have a serious issue there.
Would that not be the reason to hold the study, is to determine that, whether or not there are cars ripping down that road, not just preemptively saying, let's throw a speed bump in here? I guess it's some kind of, I'm going to need a minute to collect my thoughts, actually.
Ms. Mao?
Roughly how much does it cost to do the study?
The study it's just a matter of time. You know, if we're doing for a speed hump study on a road like that, it would take a couple weeks, because we'd have our counter box facing one direction, counting all the cars coming that way, and then we'd turn it around for another week and face the other direction. And then it would just be downloading the information and generating a report for council.
And does it actually get or survey speed as well as car count?
Yes, every vehicle that travels down that road, and not only does it count that vehicle, but it has a radar built into the box, so it'll tell us exactly how fast that car is going.
So is it at the corner only? Like, is it in the middle of the block? I mean, how does it pick up? Can it go like a whole block long to get the speed?
It could travel just about a block, but it depends on where it's aimed, and it depends on if somebody parks a box truck in front of it and blocks it. So we would position the box so that we could get a reasonable, I mean, we wouldn't put it right at the beginning of the block when you're coming from a stop sign, you're doing 5 miles an hour past it, and then you're doing 35 once you've gone beyond it. So it would be back towards the end of the block where you would have the best opportunity to pick up speed, assuming that you're traveling at your fastest as you've made it, as you're heading towards the other end of the block. And then we would move it down to the other end of the block and capture the vehicles that were coming at it to try to get the best idea of, you know, catch the cars that are going at their fastest. And then we would break it down by how many cars traveled how fast they were going, knowing what the speed limit is, and then we would give you a percentage of how many cars were speeding, number one, and of those cars that were speeding, how fast were they speeding? Were they merely going 5 miles an hour, or were they doing 15 miles over the speed limit?
So what you're saying is that doing this study will get us the data that we all need to make up our minds to actually put up a speed hump or a speed table there or not. So, and it doesn't cost us much other than an officer going out, putting up the boxes, switching it over, and then counting the data later, right?
I believe yes.
Okay.
I believe the answer to your question is yes.
So, quite frankly, I can't understand why we have a resident here that's, he's not here anymore, but we have had a resident here, we have a petition. It doesn't cost us a whole lot of money other than the officer's time. We get all the data that we need, so why can't we just stop arguing about it, ask the mayor to get it done, and do it, so we can make the decision next month?
Mr. Richter.
I guess my concern is it's been voiced through several individuals now that we don't think, yes, we don't know what the data is going to show, but the belief is that the data is not going to show that it's necessary. So if that were to happen and it comes back, clearly the residents want it, clearly the councilman on that street wants it. So then where does that leave us? That leaves us with data that's not showing that we need it, but certain people that want it, and I think it's just a slippery slope. The other thing I would ask the chief is any estimate on how much police time as a resource this takes, because whether we like it or not, there is a value to that, and having been with the police force on several occasions, I know how precious our time is down there, as I'm sure everybody respects. So, even if it's a matter of an hour, I think that's still something that's important.
It would definitely take a couple hours. The run life in the battery is about a day and a half or so. So about every day and a half, an officer has to go out there, take the old battery, take the battery that's in there, put a fresh battery in, then charge the other battery, and in the course of a week, we probably change that battery at least 3 times. And then it's a matter of, and then we review the data. Hopefully, we have the data. Sometimes, if somebody parks a truck or there's a branch that blocks the view, or we have some problem where the thing dies, we have to extend it a week or so. And it's just a matter of a couple hours of breaking down and generating the report.
Ms. Mayo.
Doing the study and getting the data that we need will help us all make our decision. And, there's 50 miles is 50 miles an hour, which is what everybody that's concerned about this is saying that cars go, is twice the legal speed limit on that street. There are children on that street, and we've made decisions before where we directed the police department to do a study. It came back and said that a stop sign wasn't needed. I'm referring to maybe 2 years ago when we did a new stop sign on Gay Street. And so the police said that we didn't need a stop sign there yet. We still put one there because the public asked us to do it. They needed us to do it. I'm not saying that we need to make a decision on whether or not we're doing the speed table or not tonight. I'm just asking us to move forward on the study.
So
Let me go to Mr. Dalton, and then I'll come back to the chief.
I was curious as to, what was the mayor's position again on the item? I want to make sure that I'm fully understanding.
Basically, that it's clear to the chief and I that the study will not produce the results that would justify this speed hump in that location.
So you're taking an assumption for the possibility and making a decision without, I guess you would call it, proper data. Just so I'm clear, that's the sacrifice you're willing to make is an assumption based
I'm
around
explaining
no
to
data.
you.
Hold on, Mr. Mayor. You're making an assumption based off of no data that possibly affects the citizens of your town.
As I'm explaining to you, Mr. Dalton, my experience working with and doing the studies and putting it out there, that it's clear to me that it won't be there. So you can
clarify
frame
what
that
your-
as ever you like.
Can you clarify what your experience is again?
6 years, Chairman, Police Personnel Public Safety Committee.
And how many of those surveys do you think you've probably done?
How many surveys have I completed? A countless number. And I just want to reiterate, we will do what council instructs us to do on this matter. That's it. That's the bottom line. So I don't know where you're coming from.
Mr. Prudnick.
So, I mean, just wanted to add a little bit. So, my main reason for asking, and I don't see the value of the traffic study, is number D on the petition. It says that the average daily traffic shall not be less than 1,000 vehicles per day. There's no way that there's more than 1,000 vehicles on that street. Just for that reason alone, the traffic study would fail. Then you have, I'm assuming the box would be somewhat visible. It's not going to be a hidden box somewhere that people can't see. Is that right, Chief? It would be a visible box to people.
The box would be visible, yes.
Yeah, so people are going to see that box and they're going to slow down. I mean, just as when they see a police officer today, they slow down. So, I mean, I agree with the chief and the mayor that I don't see merit in holding the study, and I think we'd be back here next month. And I mean, Ms. Mayo, I understand your point about why don't we just get the data and then come back and make the decision, but John also has a valid point that that data might be inconclusive, and it's a slippery slope. I know being on council for the last roughly about 9 months, and living in that area of the borough, I have had numerous people, as people find out I'm on council and they find out my where I'm at with council, they've come to me and said, hey, we have traffic problems on Anderson, they have problems on this street. I'm sure just as they come to the chief and the mayor. I've heard those things over and over again. And my answer to them back is, okay, let me find out the process. Let's see how it goes through Griffin. Let's see what we can do. But I wanted to leave this part till later, but my point is we have a bigger problem of traffic and traffic flow and speeding, at least what I know is in that area of the borough. I've heard from other council members that in the areas of the borough, there's also speeding issues. So I think in general we have, just as we have a parking problem, we have a speeding issue where people are using cut-throughs. So we don't want speed bumps everywhere in the borough. That's a valid point. We don't want them decorated on different streets, and we want to go through this every month. I think in the long term we need to find a better solution for reducing the speed of people cutting through our town. For whatever reason, if they're in our town, leaving town to work, or if they're coming from Royersford and cutting through our town to get somewhere, I think we have a bigger problem on our hands than just one street. And I think this is just one solution we're asking to see if this works. And if it does work, then we can come back and discuss other options for other streets.
Chief?
Thank you. Just 2 points. One, as far as the police department saying that we don't need a stop sign or we don't need a speed hump, what we do is Borough Council has come up with its criteria of what it decides is minimum criteria. And so with regard to stop signs, for instance, Borough Council has adopted PennDOT standards. If PennDOT were to come out and do a study on a PennDOT road, they would use a standard, a criteria, whether or not they determine that a stop sign is needed. Council has adopted those standards as theirs. So what the police department does is we go out and do a study, and we would say, according to your standards, it doesn't meet A, B, C, D, or E, and then we give it to you. Not that I'm saying we don't need a stop sign or we don't need speed humps. I'm just saying that this request does not meet the standards that you guys have decided to adopt, which take it as it is. When we did the speed hump survey in Canalkin, we knew from the very beginning it wasn't going to meet one of the criteria of the speed humps, yet there are speed humps up on Canalkin. Because you can put them in there. A lot of times, the vast majority of accidents that we have at intersections actually occur at stop sign intersections, where people will run a stop sign and smash into each other. It's rare that intersections that, at every intersection there's at least a two-way stop. It's not always a four-way stop. And we know from all the reports that we read every day, whether if somebody wants a stop sign at A and B, and we know that we can't even remember the last time there was an accident there, we can guess that the our survey is going to show that this particular intersection doesn't meet your criteria, which doesn't mean you couldn't put a stop sign there anyway. So I think what, you know, what Shai and what the mayor were saying is, when you look at the street and you see the distance of the street and you figure the vehicles that go there, it's probably not going to meet your standards. So I think he was either like, cut to the chase. If you want a speed hump, just, you know, put it there anyway. But if you'd like the data, then just direct us and we'll do a study. But our study will either say this supports what council has determined is their criteria for a speed hump, not that the police department has determined that it doesn't need a speed hump. We're just reporting back to you basically as a consultant to you.
Thank you for that clarification, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Richter?
Sorry, Mr. President, just have one question. And Chief or Mr. Mayor, if you know off the top of your head, there's a speed hump on High Street, which is a fairly heavily trafficked area. Do you know if that particular situation met the criteria?
I do know the answer to that question. It does not. The people on High Street were having problems with their side view mirrors getting knocked off quite a bit. And they said it's a speed problem. The cars are flying down the road and are knocking off our mirrors. And we determined it's not a speed problem, it's the narrowness of the road problem. The way to correct that would be to eliminate parking on one side of the road. The road would be wide enough for cars to pass and you wouldn't have that problem. Nobody wanted to eliminate parking on either side of High Street, so the speed tables, it was originally removable speed humps, and then they turned into the permanent speed tables to slow traffic down. And pretty much that was kind of the same criteria up on Canalkin. They said there again, you have parking on both sides of the road. It's relatively narrow and it turns quite a bit. And there was an issue. It wasn't so much an issue of speed. It was an issue of the narrowness of the road and cars hitting mirrors and things, but the speed humps on High Street didn't meet the criteria as well.
Any further discussion? Mr. Prednick?
I mean, I think we debated pretty sufficiently. I'll give it a shot and make the motion to direct, I believe the motion.
There's already a motion on the floor. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I'd just like to make one last comment. Hopefully, Councilman Dalton, with your colleagues expressing this debate rather than an argument, Councilwoman Mayo, there was no need for personal attacks. I certainly do care about every member of our community. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion on the floor, for a reminder, is to recommend or request that the mayor instruct the police department to conduct the traffic study for a speed table on Griffin between Main and Gay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries 6-2. Myself and Ms. Dugan being the nays. Mr. Prednick?
I have a question. Could a motion be made to request staff can a motion be made to request staff to install the speed hump without the study? Is that possible or no?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to make that motion. So I'd like to make a motion to request that staff install a speed hump on the location on Griffin Street per the petition, foregoing the speed hump study. So I'd like to make a motion to request that borough staff install a speed hump on the location of the petition, foregoing the speed hump study.
Moving on to item 13, we'll open up the second round of public participation. I invite members of the public who wish to discuss and participate to come forward, to ask that you sign in, announce whether or not you're a borough resident, and please keep comments to 5 minutes or less.
Yes, my name is Bob Domorowski from 147 Columbia Avenue. and it's been over 90 days, and I may have missed it before I came in around 8 o'clock. We've been waiting on a handicap sign, and I've been in contact with borough staff several times. Everything's been done. They said it was waiting to go to the council and that it would go to tonight's meeting. I do not see it on the agenda, and I'm just trying to find out if in fact it has been brought to the attention of the council tonight, or if in fact you know when that will happen.
Mr. Domorowski, this is public participation. We'll answer your question as soon as I can get an answer, but this is not the time for a give and take and response.
That's fine. I just wanted to bring it to the attention because it's been over 90 days, and that's what we were promised.
Thank you. Okay.
Do you have his, anybody have his contact information, or?
We're going to address it after public participation.
Hi, my name is Tish Jones, and I am an ex-council person. I live here in Phoenixville. I have a concern about a wire that's hanging down on Fillmore and Franklin right there at the corner, and it's something that I have expressed a concern about before, but I didn't really bring in the correct place. I just said it was on Franklin at the corner where the park was. But I just wanted to ask if there's a possibility that someone would take care of that, because of the fact that I think that it's a very dangerous thing to see this wire hanging down, and it's a very, very busy corner. And I help out with the Children's Learning Center, and we're taking kids down there all the time, and of course most of the time we have them in control, but you never know what could happen. That's one thing. The other thing that I'm going to bring up is about the stop signs. Once I got a ticket because I didn't stop at a stop sign. And what the policeman told me at that time, that I should, when I come to a complete stop, that I should count to 3 and then go on. Now, what I do see here in our town is that people, many, many people, are not stopping at stop signs. They're slowing down. That's their idea of what stopping means to them. But I think that I saw a sign, I believe it was in Royersford. It said, come to a complete stop and then you can move on. Ride through the sign and you have a ticket of $150. So these are things that we could use to pay attention to the fact that many, many people are not stopping at the stop signs. And especially there where the library is and at the park, people are just stopping, slowing down and then rolling through. So it is something to be concerned about.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any further public participation? Seeing none, I'll close the public participation section. And for clarification, the sign at 147 Columbia was part of the ordinance that was approved earlier today. Mr. Crack.
The name on the application, though, was not the name. He said it was, it's Veraday? Yes. That got approved tonight.
Moving on to item 14, staff reports. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few events I'd just like to mention. On Saturday, August 23rd, Family Activities Day in Reeves Park. Friday, September 5th, First Friday. Great crowd this Friday. Also, just like to mention that that was one of the evenings that Councilman Ichter did a ride-along with the members of our department. And Saturday, September 6th, despite the overcast, the Blues Festival was held, and it was a fairly large crowd. I'd also just like to take the opportunity to thank Chief Fetterman and the Schuylkill Police Department and their officers, along with Chief Franciscus and the East Pikeland officers who were on standby during the time that we were able to have our entire Phoenixville Police Department participate in the ceremony this evening. And along with Gene's birthday, I'd also like to mention that today, September 9th, is Chief Mossman's it's his anniversary. He spent 23 years on the department here, and he has begun his 24th year this evening. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations, Chief. Thank you for your years of service. Manager's report.
Mr. President, I have just two items. One is a consideration of staff recommendation to purchase a Cobra Magnum 32 RL body installed on a Peterbilt Model 348 cab and chassis sanitation truck through CoStar's contract 25-037 in the amount of $162,926. I know we talked about it in committee. We had to go back and reaffirm the numbers because the original quote was over 30 days old. We did that. The numbers are still holding true. That's why we have the recommendation. And this was discussed about the need for this particular truck. The current truck is failing. This trade-in will be, we will get $85,000 for the existing truck. And the borough would remit the remaining balance of $77,926, which was in the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. What is Ms. Mayo? Motion by Ms. Mayo, second by Mr. Richter. On the motion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
And the other item is just for council, next week I'll be down at the ICMA conference down in Charlotte, so I'll be out Monday through Thursday of next week.
Item C, co-director's report, the Public Works Director's report, Fire Chief's report, and Finance Director's report are in the packet. If council has any questions with regard to those. Mr. Neese.
I just wanted to let council know, you'll get in your packets next month, but I just got the notification today that the S&P Standard & Poor's has reissued our AA bond rating, and so I thought council would like to know that. We just got that information this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Neese. That is good news. Moving on, Fire Department liaison. Nothing. Executive session, we do have real estate litigation and I believe employment matters to discuss.
I'll make a motion to move to executive session.
Second.
And we do need to come back and take action, I believe, after the executive session. Mr. Prednick was the second. Mr. Richter is the motion maker. Oops. Coming back from executive session at 10:53, discussions related real estate litigation and personnel. Mr. Richter.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to enter into an agreement to settle the pending tax assessment appeals of Palma LP related to the Franklin Commons property, acceptable to the Borough Council, Borough Manager, and Borough Solicitor.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Prednick. Any discussion on the motion? Oh, we will open this up to public participation as it is a discussion coming out of executive session. I'll close public participation, seeing none. Any council discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
I would like to make a motion to approve the settlement agreement as to the Chester County Orphans Court case number 1513-0684 in RE of the Phoenixville Volunteer Fire Relief Association in accordance with the terms of the settlement document approved and incorporated herein.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Ms. Mayo. Again, I'll open up participation on this issue. Seeing none, I'll close public participation. Any council discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Motion to adjourn. Thank you very much.